Good morning. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. I remember hearing this verse frequently as a kid, and I wondered why there were so few workers. But I had it in my heart that I was going to be a worker. I wanted to reach unreached people with the gospel. And I felt the Lord's leading in my life and knew the people that God was calling me to reach. I spent 5 years of intense training because that's what was required for me to learn the language and the culture of this people group. According to Pew Research, only 4% of this group are evangelical Christians, and a larger group than that are actually antagonistic to the gospel. But I've spent much of my life trying to reach them and equipping others to reach them as well. And you might be asking what country that is, but you won't find it on the map. Those people are scientists. Even though I never left the United States, I've shared my faith with scientists from places like Bulgaria and Tunisia, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam. Now, maybe God's calling you to serve in overseas missions, and if so, that's awesome. But maybe God is calling you to be a worker, a missionary in a different way. Maybe as a business major, you're being called to be a missionary to Wall Street or Charlotte. Maybe as a cinematography major, he's calling you to be a missionary to Hollywood or Atlanta. Maybe as nursing, biomed, or health science, you're going to be a missionary to hospitals and medical facilities. Maybe as an education major, you're going to be a missionary to public schools. In whatever way God has equipped you and shaped you, in whatever platform and position of influence he gives you, you can use that to reach people with the gospel of Jesus. We need missionaries in all these fields because the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. You'll have to learn the culture and the language. And with scientists, I found many of them have intellectual barriers, excuses and defenses, really, that they put up to try to block the gospel. So I needed to learn what those objections were and how to counter them so that I could knock down those strongholds. And once I had a lengthy conversation with an atheist scientist, he gave many objections, which I countered with evidence. To his concession, he admitted that I had the stronger case for point after point after point, until he ran out and just said, "So what? I don't care." And that was it. I realized from that I needed a 1-2 punch. It wasn't going to be enough to knock down the intellectual barriers. I also had to have the second punch, the heart. And as I was teaching one day, I came across this perfect illustration of the gospel. You see, some people use the Romans Road or the 4 spiritual laws or Dr. Jones's one-verse method. My method is the apoptosis signal pathway. Now, I seriously use this to share the gospel with a scientist from Vietnam. Because you see, apoptosis is programmed cell death. It's a death pathway for cells that actually are supposed to die. And it happens between your fingers while you're in the womb, because during development, we actually have paddles. And so the cells between the fingers have to die. Otherwise, you end up with webbing between them. And some people like me have a little bit of webbing by the thumb. Okay? So they're programmed to die. The default pathway is death. Oops. Go back. The default pathway is death. And it's genetically programmed. It's supposed to do that. Now, if you have the survival signal will activate protein kinase B, also known as AKT, and that does something very interesting. It phosphorylates this protein called BAD. That's the real name. That's the scientific name, BAD. What BAD does in the cell is it holds this death inhibitory protein, without which the cell dies. Okay? So BAD is holding the death inhibitory protein, so the cell will die. When BAD is phosphorylated, it releases the death inhibitory protein and the cell lives. And so, how does this relate to the gospel? Well, my one verse is John 3:18. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. See, the default pathway is death. And without the survival signal, taking out BAD, without Jesus taking away our sin from his death and resurrection, default's death, with Jesus, life. The person actually understood, they knew this, and they saw that, like I explained it, they got it. They didn't accept Christ, but I'm hoping that every time they see the apoptosis pathway, they remember that. What I really want to focus on today, though, is what the greatest creation miracle is. Greatest creation miracle. But miracles are difficult for people, especially scientists, because it's like the opposite of science. So when addressing folks like this, there's a difference between general revelation and special revelation. So general revelation is what's available to all of us. And it's the science stuff. It's natural laws and processes. It's using our senses or extensions of senses with microscopes and telescopes and things like that. But it's what's available to all. And we see that in Romans. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. So what we should see in the world is evidence that would point to God. But we can't get everything we need to from just the physical evidence. And so there's something else, which is special revelation. So special revelation is revealed. This is in God's Word. In Matthew, Jesus asked Peter, "Who do you say that I am? Thou art the Christ." And Jesus' response is, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven." Jesus, in his physical bodily form, would bleed just like us. We could take his blood pressure, EKG, everything about him would tell us he was a man just like us. But the part of him being the Son of God, that requires special revelation. And in Hebrews 11:3, it's something else. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. That's creation ex nihilo. We can't discern that from the physical universe itself. We can know that there is a creator, but we can't know the creator. So we have to distinguish that. If we look at the work of creation as we try to understand what was the greatest creation miracle, creating something from nothing, that's pretty impressive. Creating the fabric of space and time, that's pretty good. Separating the light from the darkness, that's a good one. Not the best, not the most impressive. How about on the second day, God separates the water from the water, makes the sky or firmament. That's pretty impressive. Not the greatest. How about on day 3, God makes all the various plants. Some are so beautiful. Some smell so beautiful. Some taste wonderful, as the plants were made for food. That's not the greatest. How about day 4? God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. Very cool thing about the sun and the moon. The size of the sun versus the size of the moon is exactly the same as the distance the sun is to the earth versus the moon. Because of that ratio being the same, they appear to be the same size in the sky. And that sets Earth up to be a very unique place in the solar system because Earth is the only place that we have both solar and lunar eclipses. And because we have eclipses, we can actually learn some things about the sun because it's only during an eclipse that you can measure the corona and other aspects of the sun. So Guillermo Gonzalez is the one who's put it this way. It's amazing that the only place in the solar system that has a platform for observers is also the place where we have the most spectacular sights of the solar and lunar eclipses. That's pretty impressive. That's a great miracle. Not the greatest. But if we look out in space, we see things like this nebula. The heavens declare the glory of God. And this cloud is so big, 1,000 planet Earths could fit across. This picture is the Hubble Deep Field. And you can see all these little lights and some that are clearly galaxies. But all those little lights, they are not individual stars. They are galaxies filled with millions of stars. And to give you a perspective of like how much space, if you looked up at the night sky, like how much space is represented by this picture. If you take a pencil and hold it at arm's length, the tip of the pencil would block that little spot of the sky that's representing that many millions and billions of stars. So we'd have all of those fields in every direction if we looked. And what's most amazing to me, thinking about how big the universe is and how many stars there are, the hairs on our head are numbered. In Psalm 8, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the sun, moon, and stars that you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? And the funny part about the stars in Genesis is it's a throwaway line, right? It's talking about the greater light, the lesser light. And then it's like, oh yeah, and he made the stars too. And then when God tells Abraham, right, count the stars if you can. Well, when we look up at the night sky, we actually could count the stars. But God knows we can't because he knows how many there really are. So the stars, that's a pretty impressive miracle. How about all of the birds and fish? That's pretty impressive. But then we come to day 6. Day 6, God made all of the land animals, which includes dinosaurs. And then, of course, created man and woman in his image. So of all of the creatures that God made on day 5 and 6, it's only man that's given dominion. It's only man that's created in the image of God. Maybe we're getting closer. But I want to share a little bit about natural selection and evolution, because this is pushed so much in our schools and so forth. Especially the example of a giraffe, right? How did the giraffe get its long neck? Well, according to the science textbook, ancient giraffes had varying lengths of neck. With climate change, the long-necked giraffes could feed on the tall trees. The short-necked giraffes could not. They died. Now, I ask, though, why didn't they evolve to eat the grass? But they didn't. They died. But then I ask, so what about the zebra? What about all the other animals? Like, isn't there food for that? Like this, I'm a little confused. Okay, but the short-necked giraffes died, and the long-necked giraffes survived to reproduce, and that's how they got a long neck. And I told this story like this: why didn't they evolve to eat grass? Until one day, I ran across this in an encyclopedia. The giraffe's neck is a textbook example of adaptation. It's come about by natural selection, even though it's never actually been demonstrated that giraffes feed more efficiently at high levels. And then I went to a zoo that had giraffe in a large field. And I was so excited. I'm snapping pictures like crazy because giraffe eat grass. And just so you go to the Riverbank Zoo, all the giraffe are eating out of the feeder box, or they're eating the food that people are giving them really high up. And you notice there's no grass where the giraffe are, because not just they walked on it, they ate all of it. Okay? So let's get back. So giraffe, I forgot this. Giraffe are really amazing creatures. They're incredible. They have a lot of special characteristics that God designed for them to have. That long neck, they have the same number of cervical vertebrae that we have. They're just bigger. And they have a ball and socket joint like our finger, so that's how they can bend their neck. And so, in a sense, though, giraffe actually have a short neck because they also have to bend over to drink. So the giraffe have an extra large heart. It's the size of a basketball. And it's needed to pump the blood with enough pressure to get it up to the head. So the giraffe, when it bends over to drink, the extra large heart with extra force pumps all the blood, rushes to the giraffe's head, and the head blows off. Oh, you didn't see that. You didn't see that because giraffe have one-way restricted valves in the arteries that restricts the blood flow when it goes down. They also have a structure at the base of the neck called the mirabla, which soaks up some blood. And they have extra tight skin in the face to have counter pressure. So they're fine. They can drink the water without their head blowing up. But in the wild, there's going to be a lion. So they're bent over drinking water. They hear the lion roar. They lift up their head really fast. the blood pressure change causes them to be dizzy and they fall over and the lion eats them. Oh, you didn't see that either, because remember that rate mirabile that soaked up extra blood? Well, when they lift their head up, it releases the blood so it maintains the correct blood pressure so they don't get dizzy like sometimes we do. That's pretty impressive. Not the greatest creation miracle. But Adam and Eve were real people, and we see this. Genesis 3, Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. We have the genealogy of Jesus, all of the people in Luke 3. Acts 17, Paul says, from one man he made every nation of men. We see that in Timothy, God made Adam first and then Eve. In 1 Corinthians, Paul draws the contrast between Adam and Christ. And in Mark 10, Jesus says, from the beginning of creation, the Creator made them male and female, reinforcing these are real people. This list, I don't expect you to be able to read it. This list is some of the differences between humans and chimps. I want to point out two. A baculum in chimp, which I'm not going to go into. And second is humans are unique in the way that we have neurons that connect the emotional center of the brain to our tear ducts. So only humans have the ability to cry from emotion, both from joy or from sadness. I don't see any evolutionary advantage to being able to do that. But what also happens is we release cortisol, the stress hormone, and the circuit connects to release endorphins. So when people say they feel better after crying, they should. It's how God wired us. Uniquely human. That's pretty good. Day 7, God rested. That's not really a miracle, but it's a fact. But let's talk about embryonic development. After fertilization, the neural tube is developing about day 19. That's day 19 after conception. So this is barely after the woman has noticed she missed a period. We'll already have the neural tube forming. That's why women who may become pregnant are encouraged to take prenatal vitamins, because neural tube development requires certain vitamins, or it can cause some problems. Neural tube becomes the brain and spinal cord. This is within days. Weeks 3 to 4, we actually have a heartbeat. Now, some will say it's just a collection of singular beating or pulsating cells, but that's what the heart is. Okay? Like, I have a collection of synchronous beating cells. Week 3 to 4, this is, right, the woman is probably just taken a pregnancy test, and the heart's already beating. Also, in weeks 3 to 4, the limb buds appear. The paddle's coming out. Okay. During weeks 3 to 8, we have rapid growth and differentiation of all of the various tissues. By the end of 8 weeks, all the organs and organ systems are established. Continuing into the second trimester, kidney, liver, spleen are functioning. Our skeleton starts out as cartilage. That's a framework for the bones to be produced. And in months 3 to 4 is when the face starts to develop and the baby doesn't look like an alien anymore. Months 5 to 6, sometimes they'll say fetal movement begins. The baby's actually moving before that, but you can't detect it because the baby is so small. And so we can detect movement 5 to 6. Fetus is responding to external sounds. So babies, when they're born, actually recognize the voices of their mom and their dad. Lungs begin to produce surfactant, which is required to be able to have air pass from the outside into the body tissues. And then the last trimester, the baby is preparing for life on the outside as all the organs come into full development. Lungs and digestive system are functioning at the time of birth. This is pretty impressive. In any birth, considering the number of things that can go wrong, might rightly be considered a miracle. So, is this the greatest creation miracle? I think we're getting warm. Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So is this the greatest creation miracle? Not just the creation of Adam from dirt and then Eve from his side, the creation of each person. I think the greatest creation miracle of all we see in Psalm 51:10. Create in me a pure heart, a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. We can look at the stars, we can look at molecules, we can look at organs. All of this is amazing and reveals God's glory. But the greatest creation miracle is making a dead person alive, is making a sinful black heart clean from the blood of Jesus. That is the greatest creation miracle.